The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any affiliated organization, company, or institution.
Hello, I'm Earl Butch Graves Jr., the CEO of Black Enterprise. Welcome to the second installment of the 2025 Black Enterprise Virtual Town Hall Series, hosted by our partners at Nationwide. For this discussion, we have convened an expert panel to make recommendations for the future of Black business and entrepreneurship in a dramatically changed, rapidly shifting global marketplace. As we approach the 55th anniversary of the founding of Black Enterprise by my father, Earl Graves Sr., we remain true to our mission of elevating Black excellence by focusing on solutions to drive lasting economic advancement and financial empowerment for African Americans. A central part of that mission is facilitating candid, solution-focused conversations with the best subject matter experts and thought leaders in business, politics, civil rights, public policy, and beyond. Black entrepreneurs and Black-owned businesses have always been the most reliable and impactful drivers of economic advancement and wealth creation for African Americans, and never more so than today. As we focus on the future of Black business and entrepreneurship, we've challenged our panelists to offer guidance toward effective solutions in response to the following question. What should Black entrepreneurs, founders, and investors prioritize now to maximize the creation, scale, impact, and competitiveness of Black-owned businesses, whether startups or acquisitions? Our panel is uniquely qualified to address this topic. However, I will take the liberty of providing you with two key takeaways for this discussion. First, we must remind corporate America of what Operation Hope founder John Hope Bryant stated during our first virtual town hall discussion. Our nation will not prosper and succeed without the inclusion of Black people in that prosperity at every level, in every sector of wealth creation in our economy. Black entrepreneurs deserve not guaranteed results, but guaranteed opportunity and access on a level playing field with or without a DEI label. Corporations will not be able to conduct business where Black people live, work, and play without intentionally doing business with Black-owned companies and investing in Black communities. Our relationship with corporate America must be as partners in business growth, economic mobility, and wealth creation, not just as an easy source of consumer spending and entry-level labor. When you choose not to invest in us, we will not spend with you. Black business owners must have a seat at the table of global wealth creation. Second, and perhaps even more important, we as Black people must look to ourselves to ensure the growth and success of Black entrepreneurs and Black-owned companies. Yes, that means intentionally seeking, prioritizing, and spending more directly with Black-owned businesses. It also means actively pursuing opportunities to provide seed and growth capital to Black entrepreneurs to start and acquire businesses as part of your diversified investment portfolio, even if you don't choose to be an entrepreneur yourself. In short, Black people must do business with Black people in the same way we demand that corporate America does business with us. We must lean on, support, and invest in each other for the collective advancement of Black people. Who else besides the greater Black community have Black entrepreneurs have ever been able to count on for our growth and success. Ultimately, the future of Black business and entrepreneurship is up to us, as it has been throughout American history. We do not always have control of the external forces, both political and economic, that impact our lives. However, America cannot thrive without us. All of us must take action to power the wealth creation engine of Black entrepreneurship, even in environments hostile to our ambitions. This virtual town hall will explore what we must do now to achieve that objective. So, let's begin our insightful panel as our moderator, Black Enterprise Senior Vice President and Executive Editor, Alfred Edmond Jr., starts the conversation. Over to you, Alfred.
Thank you, Butch. And thanks to all of you for joining us for this critically necessary conversation with some of the nation's leading voices on the creation, capitalization, and profitable growth of Black-owned businesses and the development of robust ecosystems of Black founders, entrepreneurs, and investors. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior Vice President and Executive Editor of Black Enterprise. Our virtual town hall on the future of Black business and entrepreneurship is the second of several planned for 2025. If you have yet to see our first virtual town hall on the current economic outlook for African Americans, I urge you to view it on the Black Enterprise YouTube channel or, of course, at blackenterprise.com, as it recommends critical action items that we will address in more depth during this town hall discussion. Even before the events of the past year, the racial wealth gap and its consequences for Black people, businesses, and communities was a major challenge to the continued progress of African Americans. The dramatic changes and disruptions taking place since the start of this year have only intensified our urgent need to address the economic trends, challenges, and opportunities impacting us today and shaping our futures, fortunes, and quality of life going forward. The aim of today's virtual town hall discussion is to energize and activate established and aspiring Black founders, entrepreneurs, and venture investors to recognize, create, and pursue opportunities to increase the number, scale, capitalization, and competitiveness of Black-owned companies in order to grow Black wealth in 2025 and beyond. I am happy and excited to serve as your moderator for this discussion and to introduce our esteemed town hall panel. Dr. Randal Pinkett, Chairman and CEO of BCT Partners, an award-winning multidisciplinary business management consulting firm and one of the nation's largest Black-owned companies. Randal's most recent of several books is Data-Driven DEI, the tools and metrics you need to measure, analyze, and improve diversity, equity, and inclusion. Lauren Maillian, founder, LMB Group, a global strategy advisory firm that partners with high-growth consumer brands and organizations. Lauren, a successful entrepreneur who has invested in and advised more than 40 startups, is also the author of The Path Redefined, Getting to the Top on Your Own Terms. And finally, we are also joined by Nicholas M. Perkins, Chairman, President, and CEO of Perkins Management Services and owner of Fuddruckers' World's Greatest Hamburgers. Nicholas achieved a significant milestone in the history of Black business with his $18.5 million acquisition of the Fuddruckers brand in 2021. Thank you, Randal, Lauren, and Nicholas for joining us for this critical conversation aimed at energizing our audience to gain clarity and confidence as they pursue their goals in the current economic environment. Let's get started. Thank you guys again for joining us for this conversation about the future of Black business and entrepreneurship, especially as we go into 2025 with so many changes in terms of economic policy, obviously the political environment. This is a very important conversation as we talk about the future of Black business and Black entrepreneurship. Let me start out with you, Randal, and let's call it the elephant in more than one way in the room, and that is the corporate pushback against DEI. You and I had a conversation 5 years ago at the front end of the pandemic about all these pledges being made by corporations about their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The companies that had already been committed to it will stay committed to it no matter what. There are many companies that were new to the game or new to this initiative, and it remained to be seen what their long-term commitment would be as things changed over time. And now we're seeing that play out now where some companies I would say J.P. Morgan Chase, maybe for example, Costco's getting a lot of attention for saying, no, this is our way of doing business. You can call it what you want. We may not call it DEI anymore, but this is what we do. But there are other companies that are falling off or pulling back either publicly or silently. Your company, BCT Partners, not only does business with many of these corporations, but also has been very vocal about DEI as a business imperative, both for your company and for corporate America as a whole. What do you see as the landscape as Black-owned companies that are doing B2B business with major corporations and government as we move deeper into 2025?
I remember that conversation that we had very vividly, Alfred, and it feels like decades ago that we were talking about how the landscape has shifted so dramatically. And if I think about 2000 to 2022, you figure 2022 was probably the height of the effect of George Floyd's murder and what that meant for DI. And that's a 22-year span I'm referring to. I remember we used to talk about Workforce 2000 and the ushering in of the demographic changes in America. And now juxtapose that against 2023 to 2025. And we're not even through 2025. That's a 3-year span that we're talking about, which I describe the latter as the diversity heyday. I'm sorry, the former as the diversity heyday and the latter as the reversity heyday. Reversity is the phrase that I've settled on to succinctly describe what we're observing. And it is a dramatic shift. And you've already given voice to that. I think for Black business owners to see the retrenchment of the progress that we've made with supplier diversity, to see the dismantling of the agencies designed to scaffold that support. I think of the Minority Business Development Agency. I think of the Small Business Administration. I think of all the member corporations of the likes of the National Minority Supplier Development Council. The list goes on. I think about what the ruling on the Fearless Fund meant. The picture I'm trying to paint is there's the reality and then there's the fear that it has engendered. The affirmative action ruling, the Trump administration, the scaling back and the attacks have created fear that I believe overrepresents the current reality. And to your opening remarks, this is the moment when, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And when those who were never committed to this work were the first to run away from the work. So we're now seeing a shakeout for who's truly committed to this work, who's not. And my advice to Black business owners is twofold. First, go with what you know. If you know a company is committed to this work, either publicly or privately, because some are going into stealth mode, focus your energies there, but also know that in these difficult times, history has shown successful companies are born out of these challenging times. So where there is a problem, there is an opportunity. Where there's a challenge, there is a window of opportunity. And I say see and seize where those opportunities are, and don't see this necessarily as a time for us to ourselves retrench, but to double down on what we do as entrepreneurs, which is as entrepreneurs, we see opportunity, we seek opportunity, and we seize opportunity. This still is a moment of opportunity.
Lauren, to Randal's point, one of our panelists from our first virtual town hall on the current economic outlook for African Americans, Andre Perry, who just dropped his book, Black Power Success Scorecard, or Black Power Scorecard, talked about that even in these changing, shifting environments, Black entrepreneurship has continued to grow. It's not like it's retrenched. It's been growing, and to some degree, it accelerated over the last 5 to 10 years. And his point is that even though the disparity is still there, it's not because Black business is not growing. And you've been on all sides of it. You've been a multiple time entrepreneur yourself. You're an advisor and to entrepreneurs. You're an investor in entrepreneurs. What do you see as the current landscape, both for startups, in terms of you advising them, as well as the access to capital conversation, which you've been deeply involved in for a very long time, personally and professionally?
Yeah, goodness, there's a lot to unpack there. Let's start with what I've observed. What we are encountering right now are the very difficult market shifts, and that is exactly what they are. They are shifts in the market. They are challenges in the market, and they are challenges in the market that are designed to kill the businesses and kill the brands that are not ready to be innovative, that are not ready to reinvent themselves. And you can look at this like a Blockbuster moment, when there was Blockbuster and then there was the DVD before there was, Netflix as a streaming company. You can look at this as, a changing of the time, a changing of the guard, however you want to call that. But we have change that is inherent in the ecosystem of startups, the ecosystem of entrepreneurship. Absolutely an ecosystem of fundraising, where it is difficult for everyone to fundraise right now, but especially difficult for people of color, Black people, to fundraise right now. And then we are also entering, another shift, which is technology, and how technology is creating an entirely new economy, and a new economy that is bringing with it a new way to transact business, a new way to do contracts. Some people doing contracts in the blockchain, some folks, getting paid in cryptocurrencies, some general structures just completely being flipped on their head at the same time, where we have Black businesses and Black business owners that are still trying to do the very basic step of establishing themselves, establishing trust, establishing and building credibility to be able to fundraise, to be able to knock on doors. So some of it is unique to us. Some of it is bad timing, and every time there's going to be bad timing in the market, Black people and the double minority Black women are going to get the absolute shortest end of that stick, because we are solving for the stereotypes, we are solving for the assumptions, and we are trying to keep up with the new direction in which the economy, the markets, investor expectations are moving. And generally speaking, we are trying to also find folks who look like us to join forces with us in our company, so that we can create a wealth building opportunity that benefits our people, but also so that we can build great teams who are hopefully going to be loyal to us and have our backs. Because again, this is a trickle effect. Even if we could solve for all of the things I just mentioned, we will still have investors that give out poor terms and bad term sheets. We will still have boards that try to take out leadership and try to take out founders and make it difficult. We will still have folks that, I read something over the weekend that somebody, docu-signed a deal term sheet that was actually different from the one that they had redlined and approved on PDF prior. Like, all of these things will still unfortunately happen. But where we are also right now is in a time where a lot of industries are changing. There is a lot of opportunity to make innovations that are somewhat small or somewhat simple, might be to some obvious, but that can really create a completely new, different approach to business, or a new offering to business. You can look at something as simple as pizza. How many new pizza places do we have? How many new burger places do we have? How many new cookie concepts do we have? I was watching a show last night with my kids for Mother's Day, and it was like, oh my God, are you serious? These people make this as a company? It's a super cool brand experience. They're not necessarily bringing anything markedly new to the market, but they're bringing a new approach. And so this is the time when we, as Black people, can get really creative and innovative about how we market, how we storytell, how we build community, how we build camaraderie, how we build following, how we build loyalty, in order to actually build a valuable business, even if we don't win in all of these other areas around technology and AI and engineering and deal structuring and terms and having the best lawyers and all these other things. There's so many other ways to create a strong foothold with your stakeholders, with your audience, that allow you to be in a position of power. So I would say that for Black people, find your power in the deal, and wherever you've identified that power, make sure that you never let that go. So if it's in your cultural fluency, if it's in knowing your product, if it's in knowing your customer, your market, your pricing, your holidays, your promos, whatever it is, if it's your recipes, whatever, I would make a list of where you have power and where you have leverage. And then I would make a list of where you have your vulnerabilities. And you could look at it maybe like a SWOT analysis, but I would just keep it in these two buckets, like superpowers and leverage, vulnerabilities and threats. And wherever you have those superpowers and places to leverage, I would continuously double down on that, because that will then give you the staying power that you need, A, B, make you the revenue that you're looking for, but C, give you leverage when you're in the room to negotiate if you don't have all the other pieces fall in place.
Nicholas, speaking of doubling down, you doubled down in a big way when you acquired Fuddruckers Hamburgers, the world's greatest hamburgers, in 2021. We have a huge opportunity to not only lean into entrepreneurship as startup and founding entrepreneurs, but as acquiring entrepreneurs because of this huge wave of baby boomers who are looking to find a way to exit their business, get their equity out of it. Maybe they don't have kids that want to take over the business. They don't have spouses that want to be involved. They want to get on with their life. And it's a tremendous opportunity to acquire existing businesses. And that's somewhat your story in terms of the opportunity that you got when you acquired Fuddruckers. Talk about your approach to that as an entrepreneur. You had an established business in the food space, to Lauren's point. You already had your superpower that you already knew that was more of an institutional B2B play. And then you took that over to a B2C play with acquiring Fuddruckers. Talk about that as an opportunity that you took advantage of, but also one that more of us, and I'm speaking to those who may never be startup entrepreneurs. Lauren and I have a lot of conversations about who's really ready for that life and who's not. So talk a little bit about that, both of your personal experience and as an opportunity for African Americans today.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me as well. As I echo Dr. Pinkett, I think that in 2020 during the pandemic, the reality becomes, either you're going to go all in or, a lot of people, didn't make it out. So the reality is we had to double down and say, okay, all these cafeterias are closed that we're managing on our college campuses. We don't know what the future is going to look like. So, either you're going to see it as a potential opportunity and try to capitalize and diversify the company, and then, or, are you going to pack up and, and go home, right? So that entrepreneurial grit, I think you saw in a lot of minority businesses that made it out, of that trying period. Talks about and lends, a view to, just our entrepreneurial grit. So I have to tell you, it was, a lot of internal reflection, because at that point, I was in business 15 years at that point, and it looked as if everything was going to all go up in smoke. So, I either could have, sat around and moped about the uncertainty of what was to come, or find opportunities to be able to grow and diversify. And that was what I did. I went all in again, so to speak. And there are that's the story of many African-American entrepreneurs, especially, those of us who have self-financed and found ways to be able to fight through all of the barriers that exist, that have prevented a lot of us from, achieving at the level that we are qualified and capable of doing. And so we always find a way. And so, I doubled down and, found that Fuddruckers was going to be divested by its parent company, Luby's Incorporated, at the time. And, I went to them and told them of my interest in participating in the process, and initially was not invited in. I had to kind of fight my way into that process to, even to be qualified enough to be able to submit a bid, which is typical and common for us. It's unfortunate that that is the case, but it happens. And I was one of 149 other interested people at the time that were looking to potentially acquire the brand, and was fortunate enough to be able to win. I went in, eyes wide open, so to speak, because, it was a brand that needed some TLC, and, we had to come in during a tumultuous time, really, because of the uncertainty around restaurants and what the future of the restaurant business would be, just in general, not just with Fuddruckers. And so, we had supply chain issues, we had issues with franchisees, it was just everything seemed to be in somewhat disarray. But, there was opportunity. I felt that was a once in a lifetime opportunity to acquire a franchise system And I took advantage of that, and we were able to make it through that rough period, and now began to see the light at the end of the tunnel as we're looking to franchise and open new locations. And so, it just took that entrepreneurial grit and being willing to roll the dice to take advantage of that.
Nicholas, you and I have only gotten to know each other for the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years, maybe less. When I interviewed you for Beyond the Hype a couple of years ago, I think. Lauren and Randal and I go way back, and I've been thinking of that phrase. We don't look like what we've been through.
Yes.
because the battles, and you talked about you weren't the bid that they were looking at when you came in. You weren't invited in. Lauren and I had many conversations about. Lauren, you said the double. I'm going to go the triple because of how early you started as an entrepreneur, young, black, and woman. And getting taken seriously. I really know what I'm talking about. I know how to assemble capital. And then Randal and I go back so far back I don't even want to go into it. But talk about and I want to jump to you, Lauren. You and I, Lauren, in particular, have spent a lot of our space around this idea of founder preparation and founder development. And that old saying, you don't bet the horse, you bet the jockey. And there's access to capital. Yes, there's discrimination in the marketplace. But a big part of our progress has been we got to better prepare founders, not only to start the company, to have the idea, to run the company, to build the company, to learn the management rules and tools, HR. I mean, all those elements that goes beyond, I have a great business idea. I do a lot of work right now. I've been a mentor for Pharrell Black Ambition for the last 3 years around this idea of, yes, the great idea, but are you ready? Talk about the importance, and Lauren, directed to you, and then Randal, you can jump in as well, of this idea of the founder or creating a generation of founders that is prepared.
So I'll say that in all the hats that I've worn in the last 20 years of my career, there was one in particular where I became CEO of a nonprofit organization in COVID, and I had been the chair of the board of directors for many years prior. And the organization's focus is on Black and Latina women as innovators and entrepreneurs. And I was there as CEO to run this organization, grow this organization. Ultimately, I decided to grow our programs, expand our research, add to our staff and our team, because I felt that it was very important that we did not just put so much emphasis on the deal and the terms of the deal, which often, especially for our community, is price, the value of the deal, the price of the deal, just the top line terms, and is not thinking enough about the actual structure of the deal. The amount of times that I get a call from someone going, oh, and I got this amount of equity. And it's like, okay, you think that that's the term. That's not the term. Like, I need to see you. I need to spend time with you. We need to sit down and have a meal, because that alone aren't the terms, right? And they're so excited, and they have common stock. They don't have preferred shares. They don't have information rights. They have a terrible vesting schedule. They have a very long industry abnormal cliff, as it's called, which essentially means a waiting period until you even start vesting, i.e. earning an iota of whatever the equity amount was. The amount of stories I've heard of founders that think they're getting X amount of equity, but oh gosh, there was a 2-year cliff and they had a fallout with the investor who came in, and so they actually somehow ended up with no equity or very little equity. So for me, it's really important that our community understands not just the terms, but the structure of deals and what the terms mean, the definition of the terms and the actual application of the terms in the deals that you're cutting. Because oftentimes we think we're getting ownership. We think we're getting, or we're getting to retain ownership and then just getting funding to run our business. And we don't fully understand, or the lawyers that we have hired and brought on sometimes bless their hearts, because trust me, on some of the deals where we've been dealing with some companies and purchasing them. I'll actually give you a very good example. I was doing a deal a couple of years ago with a private equity firm, and we were buying a company. And when we went to go purchase this company, the deal terms came out, and we had set forth the terms, and we are very founder-friendly capital. That is a large part of the private equity work that I do, is to also support the founders, but also build and scale a business. Buy, build, and scale. That's what I'm about. Long story short, this company in particular had just a moment of a lot going on, and they were so excited about the deal, as they should have been. It was monumental for them personally and for their business. But who they had as their lawyer was someone who'd been doing contracts for them. It was a contract lawyer who's used to reading NDAs and purchase orders and new sales agreements and things like this, not someone who's ready to deal with private equity terms and analysis and the due diligence. And these folks were leading her data room, but not really doing the data room right. And then there was all these other folks that were in the mix, and a co-founding team of men and women. But in one aspect, some of the women were leading the deal and some of the guys were leading other aspects of the deal. But clearly they hadn't done it before. And so you can't be negotiating, but also advising them on what to do and how they should do it. Something in my heart said to me when we got their attorney's comments back, it was interesting. Their attorney's comments come back and go, this should be as W-2'd income to my client. And I was like, what? And I had to call the team, their team, whose company we were purchasing. And I said, this is supposed to be capital gains. Like, you have equity in the business. It's really important. This is, nothing in it for me, because the deal, this particular line item means no difference to us in the transaction, but it means everything to their founding team if they get taxed as W-2 wages versus capital gains. And I said, I've actually never made this call before, but you need to understand, what this deal is, and maybe you want to look for a different kind of lawyer who understands the terms and structure of this particular transaction. And that is where I see us losing the most. We work really hard to get to a deal, and then we're close to the finish line, and we have terms that we don't fully understand. We have terms that aren't going to really support us in the growth areas of our business. And we think we've had a win, but it's disguised as an okie doke sometimes, and maybe not always even intentionally. But you don't get what you don't ask for. So if you don't know to ask for it, you won't ask for it. And the other side is not just going to give it to you. That's business no matter who you're doing business with. So those are the areas that I'm really passionate about, seeing our community and our people make substantive change and understanding, and building onto their team, and doing whatever homework they need to do to feel empowered when they are in the deal-making process. Because a lot of the times that makes all the difference.
Yeah, you said the word empowered, which obviously we're all talking about and what Black Enterprise is about. And I want to throw it back to you, Randal, because you and your co-founders, who, of course I know all of them because we all went to Rutgers. I a few years earlier than you, but you ran that gauntlet in real life. The kind of company you started when you guys started was what it is now. What you knew, to Lauren's point, is very different from what it is now, and that not only is the case for raising capital, is also being able to do business with good terms when you're doing business with government and large corporations. The terms matter. It's like, I got this big contract, and we've seen big contracts put companies out of business every day of the week because they don't understand the structure of the contract based on their capabilities. So talk about, again, I'm sticking with this kind of founder education, founder development conversation. What I think is a critical need is why I've been a mentor for so many years, and why I did agree to do mentorship with Black Ambition, is that one of the key missing links, let's say if the planets aligned, all the capital became available, all the doors open to Black and other entrepreneurs to get access to that capital. But if you put the capital in the hands of people, like Lauren says, don't even know what questions to ask, much less have the confidence to ask it, it all goes for naught. And so how did you guys navigate, you and your partners navigate this learning curve that has to happen if we're going to go from, mom and pop self-employment type businesses to true businesses of scale that can employ people and generate real wealth?
Yeah, I think the question you're asking, Alfred, is at the center of everything we've been talking about. As I've been listening to the wisdom of Nicholas and the wisdom of Lauren, it's a reminder to me that for us to succeed in this day and time, we have to play the game at a higher level of sophistication than perhaps we played the game historically. Again, you say mom and pop. I say historically we've been mom or pop. And when we start talking about equity investments and private equity and mergers and acquisitions and joint ventures and the like, to me, there's two pieces. There's the mindset and then there's the skill set. The mindset, I would argue, is actually the most important piece, because if we're not thinking at a higher level, if we don't believe we can acquire a Fuddruckers, if we don't believe that we can be the kind of equity investor that Lauren is, then we'll never be in the game to begin with. So the mindset has to lead the way. But then what Lauren gave eloquent voice to is we need the skill set. And it reminds me of an article I'll reference very briefly. It was in ESPN magazine years and years ago. It was called How and Why Athletes Go Broke. And the article didn't focus on athletes who were irresponsible and, squandered their money. It was the athletes who legitimately tried to invest wisely and still failed. And I think that, and what they found was they had the wrong people advising them, and they made the wrong kinds of investments. and Lauren's, her eyebrows just went up a second ago. And so what do you do when you don't know what you don't know? Now, to answer your question, Alfred, how did we get up the learning curve? We made a lot of mistakes. That's how we did it. We learned through the school of hard knocks. We didn't know what we didn't know. And we were all, I have 3 co-founding partners, Jeffrey, Lawrence, and Dallas, all first generation. We had no one that was immediately available to mentor us. Now we're in a position where we've made those mistakes and we've learned. But I think to know what you don't know is to find somebody who's been down that path and ask a very simple question. Who advised you? Who helped you? Because to Lauren's story, our first lawyer was an entertainment lawyer. We needed a contract lawyer, but we didn't know what we didn't know, so we just hired any lawyer. So I think seeking out the wisdom of folks like those of us on this call, who I believe so many of us of this generation are much more open and not threatened by the younger generation. I say this with all due respect, but when I reached out to certain older Black entrepreneurs, I think they saw me as a threat. And so I think it's incumbent upon us for our mindset to be one not just of thinking and operating at a higher level, but also acknowledging, and you said this, Alfred, not in my words, not in your words, but my words, that if somebody sacrificed for us to be where we are, we need to open up the floodgates of our experience and knowledge that their path is easier than our path.
Well, you guys all definitely do that. I'm passionate about that. And I think that's a key to our ability to move forward as entrepreneurs. But I want to lean back into, again, Lauren, my passionate belief. I've been saying this for years. Probably only 20% of any given population at any given time has any business trying to be an entrepreneur. No matter how smart you are, no matter how educated you are, that if we're only depending on, people with good ideas starting businesses in a marketplace this competitive and this challenging, even when everything looks right, it's a high risk venture. But for the first time, when you look at the income levels and obviously higher than any previous generation of African Americans, we have people who can afford to acquire, whether that's buying a percentage of an existing business that needs the capital. In other words, we are, for the first time, in my view, we don't have to just look outside of the Black community to get capital, because you have 2 or 3 generations of African Americans who built significant wealth in corporate America. You have a more educated generation of African Americans with access to resources both on Wall Street and Main Street that our parents, to your point, Randal, our parents and their parents didn't have access to. Let's be honest. But I don't think enough of us, and I'm putting myself in that category, think about or thought about early enough in our career to think, instead of me taking this, this $15,000 vacation, I could have put $15,000 in this business that I know about, and it's worth the risk. Carla Harris, managing director of legendary, I think Morgan Stanley, talking to Black professionals about diversifying your portfolio. Your retirement is already funded. Your savings account is funded. Your investments are funded. You're looking for someplace to put 2 to 5% of something else. And she's like, okay, you can buy art, or you can invest in an up and coming, and I'm going to say Black-owned startup. Lauren, you've been actively doing that. Talk about the risks and the rewards of not only starting your own companies, but putting your intellectual capital as well as real capital behind other companies.
Ooh. Talk about that's like a very open-ended question. Goodness, where do I begin? I have been doing a little bit of all those things my entire career. Since folks called me the jack of all trades, the Jill of all trades, the multi-hyphenate, all these other names, and now I think it's still so funny to me that this has become something called like the portfolio life that everybody wants now all of a sudden. This is like now a very chic thing, but I remember all the eye rolls I got and all the haters and doubters and assumptions that I lived through for many years when people thought I was not focused. And I was focused. I was just focused on a diversification that was not cool, that no one was talking about. So behind me, I actually have a piece of art that my daughter made. However, I collect a lot of art. I'm one of the largest collectors of diverse artists in the country. And I've always been pretty quiet about my art portfolio. However, I'm a little more vocal about that these days. A, because I love the artist that I own, but B, because it is an incredible asset class and you have to be very skilled and very smart about, the kinds of art that you're collecting, what your portfolio is going to look like, where you're going to house it, what your strategy is for your art, as an example. My art travels to a lot of different museums, which increases the provenance. So I love art as an asset class. I think it's a really important asset class, especially for legacy. If you want to build wealth and build legacy. And I'm not an accountant. Also, I just want to be clear, I'm not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer. However, there's a lot that you said previously, Alfred. And what it did make me think was, in as much as we need to be concerned about Black businesses, we also really need to be concerned about wealth transfer strategies, wealth protection strategies for our community. Because there are a lot of times when, yes, we might have second and third generation corporate wealth, as you mentioned, but we still don't have really good process around inheritance. We still don't have really good process around wealth transfer, whether that's gifting our children the maximum amount every year of $18,000, whether that's maxing 529s, whether that is leaving art or other collectibles or other fine objects to certain family members so that they get a step up in basis, to be smart around some of those capital gains taxes and death taxes and other things, estate taxes that we might be dealing with. And also, I'll give an experience from my own family because I'm pretty passionate about this particular topic. My paternal grandmother passed away a couple of years ago, and my father, who you've met many times over the years, Alfred, but my dad was very proud to be able to, take care of his mother, my grandma, in her last, year or two when she was at home with emphysema. And so he very proudly paid for her to have a health aide go over all the time, and grandma was really with it. And when she passed, which was a beautiful moment, but when she passed and everyone was cleaning up the house, my father found a long-term care policy for my grandma that would have taken care of everything, that was enforced, that was valid, that was fully paid for. But bless her heart, in the end of her life, she's not thinking about or remembering, and we didn't have a Google Drive or a Dropbox Drive, or everything wasn't organized with a lawyer somewhere, and it was, safe in grandma's closet, safe in a safe deposit box. And luckily, yes, we could afford it, but he spent 2 years of home health aid money that would have been provided for, that was provided for. And it didn't matter if you had receipts or proof or anything, the policy is null and void when she passes. And so, is it a huge amount of money? It depends on what you consider to be huge, but 6 figures is 6 figures, no matter how you cut it, no matter what you want to be able to do for your family. And how much smarter or better could the whole family have moved or made better decisions had we known, had we been in better communication to be able to protect what the family is creating. So I think it is really important that we buy businesses and grow businesses and invest in all these sorts of things. But if we don't have strategy around how we're growing, building, protecting, transferring, planning to share, how we want our family to inherit, then what are we doing? Then the wealth that we think we're creating hasn't been created. Who is it left to? So that I'm super passionate about. I'll stop because I could keep going on and on and on. But
you're
I
underscoring
think art is a very important one.
You're underscoring a point that our founder, Butch Gray, not founder, the son of our founder, the current CEO, Butch Grays, has said all the time, like, if it's not multi-generational, it's not real wealth. And you're bringing, one of the more powerful messages I wanted our audience to get from this town hall is that wealth creation is not just the responsibility of the entrepreneurs. And we come from such a great tradition of Black entrepreneurs. Whether you talk about John Johnson or Nurse Procope or even Oprah Winfrey. Think of the big names that people, Reginald F. Lewis, and we think, oh, that's their job. That's the entrepreneur's job to do that. And you're making a point that I'm trying to make is that no, it's all of our jobs. It's everything. It's investing in businesses, it's starting in businesses, it's supporting businesses, it's growing businesses, it's learning what we need to learn to deal with everything from the tax implications to the inheritance implications. Because if it's not multi-generational, it's not really wealth. And again, we're at this kind of tipping point when recognizing that is going to be critical, not only to growing and scaling Black-owned companies, but the overall larger goal, which is not just to say we had a big company once upon a time in our family, but that resulted in incremental advancements in wealth from generation to generation. And it goes back to the need for a commitment to self-education and learning from one another beyond whether I actually want to start a business tomorrow or not. Because maybe I never want to start a business, but it doesn't mean I don't need to know. It's all of our responsibilities. I want to shift the conversation a little bit back to you, Nicholas. One of the positive trends that was already happening before the George Floyd murder, and according to Black consumer expert Pepper Miller, who was on our last virtual town hall, it says it's escalated post the George Floyd murder, is that, pretty much from, let's say, we'll start with millennials going forward, they're now leaning into supporting, buying Black, spending money, seeking out Black-owned businesses in ways that previous generations just weren't as committed to. That it was something you had to convince, let's say, millennials and young and older to do. Where now it's having an impact on the growth of Black businesses. That now it's part of the culture to say, no, I'm going to seek out. I'm going to look for opportunities. Talk about how that plays now that you are in the B2C space, and what it means. Yes, you can't just survive on Black customers. So let's not get it twisted. Fuddruckers can't be just you're dealing with 12% of the marketplace. You need 100% of the marketplace. But talk about what it means to be able to make a acquisition like Fuddruckers and know that there's a B2C conversation that makes it an asset to you. That this idea of leaning into Black-owned companies as consumers, hopefully as investors, as supporters in many ways, is a positive to your balance sheet.
I think it's been intentional on my part to do two things. Not only is it important to introduce a brand like Fuddruckers more into the minority community intentionally than it ever had, right? When I took over the brand, I was the only African American who owned a Fuddruckers restaurant, even outside of being the franchisor. So that was problematic for me. And I knew that I wanted to be intentional about increasing opportunities for minorities to own and operate franchises. That was first thing. The second thing was where our restaurants are placed. They were a destination that one would have to commute to. A lot of times in suburbs, were not easily accessible, to the minority communities in general. And now whether that was by design or, whether it was, just happenstance, I don't know. But for me, what was important when we just opened the new Chinatown location, here in Washington, D.C., it's 50-50 or 60-40 in some instances, African-American to non-African-American people who were walking through the door of the restaurant. So it had nothing to do with whether or not Black people would be willing to purchase a gourmet hamburger. It's whether or not it was within reach, whether it was accessible to them, whether, the environment would be conducive where they would be comfortable. I wanted to make sure that we created an environment that was open to everyone, right? It was not, targeted to anyone in particular, any particular demographic other than people who wanted to enjoy a gourmet hamburger experience, right? And so, I had to, in some instances, be very intentional about the decor, the design, the environment, where the restaurants would be strategically placed to chart a new course of how we were going to go about approaching and marketing the brand going forward. And, just centered around being diverse, and having a employee workforce and a franchisee workforce that resembled our customer base. And so, and our marketing, branding, communications have become more culturally diverse, right? And I felt like that was important for us to step out there and do that unashamedly, right? And, when I think about my, primary business, which is in contract food service management, and we manage cafeterias for a number of colleges and universities, primarily historically Black institutions, we are a unicorn. You don't really see 100% minority-owned contract food management businesses in that space anymore. And so, when we look at, as you talk about, supporting African American owned businesses and, the intentionality behind contracting with our firms that are qualified and capable. When I first started a business, 19 years ago, we had a different type of college president. Okay. That came out of a different era, who was proud and happy to see young African Americans stepping out, becoming entrepreneurs. And if they bought what we were selling, they hired us. Right. So we've gone through a period of transition where there is less sensitivity to, empowering, African American entrepreneurship, because a lot of people on the outside of our community really don't fully understand it, in my opinion. They don't understand the need and the necessity to build Black businesses, to empower African American entrepreneurs, because I believe that we can solve a lot of problems within our own community and stop having to look without our community. If we invested in our own businesses and our own entrepreneurs, we could fix a lot of our own problems through the wealth that we could create if we trusted each other more. And that's just has been
Well,
my.
let me say this. This is
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alfred.
No, I was going to say this is not a commercial. This is an unsolicited endorsement, but it illustrates what you're saying. I first had my first Fuddruckers, maybe it was 10, 15 years ago.
Yes.
But it was because Black Enterprise, when we had a magazine, was printed out in Wisconsin. And I don't mean Milwaukee, somewhere, Elmira, one of those small towns in Wisconsin. And they took me to the mall, and I had Fuddruckers. And I'm like, why have I never heard of this?
Yes.
But again, it was in a very kind of to us remote because of your urban focus. That's out in the boonies. I would never go there. You're not going to catch a bus or a train there. You're not going to drive out there. Right. And so, I mean, it speaks to me of the Walmart strategy, where Walmart started out as a very rural, then they expanded to the suburbs, and then they got into urban America, and now it seems ubiquitous. Sure. But you're making a point that I think in many ways all three of you have made and are making. I'm going to throw this back to you, Randal. This doesn't work if you're seen as a Black entrepreneur that only buys, sells, does business with Black people. Like, you're not talking about building businesses of scale. BCT Partners is one of the largest Black-owned companies in the country, but when all is said and done, DEI or no DEI, BCT has to be able to deliver on a scale that has nothing to do with the race of the founders. And so there's this balancing act. And of course, Lauren, again, a lot of the companies you've been involved with, diversity has nothing to do with it. It's just, this is an investment opportunity. And yes, you're a Black woman who wants to make money, because we all want to do that. And we want to see successful businesses. Rand, I wanted to talk to you about the importance of, regardless of the political environment, regardless of the economic winds, what does it mean to be able to operate in a competitive, first-class, no shorts environment where you have to be able, when all is said and done, you got to be able to compete for the business?
That's the name of the game, is being able to compete. The name of the game is innovation. The name of the game is delivering value. The name of the game is revenue exceeds costs. I mean, like, the name of the game is running a business that, for your clients, they come to you because you're offering something to them that adds value to what they do. And that's what entrepreneurs do. Being Black owned is not a strategy. Supplier diversity is not a strategy. looking for set-asides is not a strategy. Now, let's be clear. It might be a tool in your tool belt. It might open a door. It might get you an in. There may be some value there, but it's not a strategy. A strategy is looking at the market, seeing what's needed, and filling the gap. And then, in the words of Andy Grove, being paranoid that you can maintain competitiveness and that somebody else is not taking your lunch. And I say that because I find maybe generations before us, Madam C.J. Walker, dare I even say BET, were predicated in some ways because the marketplace was much more restrictive, that you could only anticipate that Black folk might support you. So in some ways, it's like the founding of HBCUs. HBCUs still have tremendous value in the present day, but the origins of HBCUs, because that's the only place we had to go to get a quality higher education. But now in today's world, which is so much more diverse, so much more global, so much more expansive than the world that generations before came up through, we have to see ourselves as entrepreneurs and business people first who happen to be Black. And that has to drive our strategy. It has to drive our thinking. And we have to see these other opportunities, not as necessities or but as certainly opportunities if they are so aligned with the strategy of our business, but not dependent or defining the strategy of our business.
Right, absolutely. Lauren, I saw the look on your face because you never had these conversations when, and I'll be the one to say it, so you don't have to. I'm talking to entrepreneurs, and they literally think, well, they have to do business with me because, I'm Black, and they need to spend a certain amount of money with Black people. I was like, they may want to, but when the board meeting is being held and they say, what did you do with this money this past year? Who did you spend it with? Who did you do business with? Did we meet our targets? Did we meet our goals? Did we meet our objectives? I was like, you better have a better story for your corporate representative to tell than, yeah, but we did a lot of business with Black women this year, because when all is said and done, it's going to come down to performance. And I can't tell you how many times I feel like I'm almost like I'm the one that's telling them that there's no Santa Claus with some of the entrepreneurs that I mentor. Like, when it's all said and done, no matter how you got in the door, did you come through the Black Ambition door? That's wonderful. Did you come through the supply diversity door? That's wonderful. Did you come through a women's tech founders, accelerator through the door? Wonderful. But sooner or later, they're going to look at the scoreboard and they're going to ask, did you put points on that board or didn't you? And even if you have legitimate reasons about racism and sexism and lack of access, no matter what, if you don't put those points on the board, it has to be about performance. And Lord, those conversations aren't as difficult for me as they used to be. But how important it is for our audience to understand that when all is said and done, you got to be able to perform. You got to deliver.
So if I may, I'm going to answer this, but I'm going to weave in something that I didn't get to say on the last one, which is around diversification, because they actually go together now really beautifully. So Randal brings up a great point. You have to win because you're excellent at what you do, not because you're Black, or not because you happen to be, you're excellent for a Black person. Like, you need to be excellent bar none.
Right.
And then you just so happen to be Black, right? That is very much the story of my life. It's the story of my career. And when we look at diversifying, I want everyone who is with us today, here or watching the replay, wherever they might be, when you think about diversification, that applies to you. It applies to the opportunities you look at, both asset classes, but also who you're working with. That doesn't mean, the majority of my wealth has not necessarily been created from investing in Black people, hasn't even been created necessarily from investing in women. It's been from investing in the best possible deals at the right time, where I can add value with a good enough strategy or a right strategy, and where I can keep iterating until we get it right, until we reach profitability, until we have a liquidity event, until we've reached our milestones and our goals. And so I want everyone who's with us to think about the diversification when we go back to Alfred's previous question around art. It's like, yes, I have art, I have real estate, I have equity in startups. I have, equity in the stock market. I have collectibles. I have a little bit of jewelry. I don't really look at jewelry or cars as an asset class, but some pieces are going to appreciate and have appreciated. But I look at all these different places, and then I make sure that I diversify within those buckets, right? Because my goal is to make sure that I'm excellent. My goal is to make sure that I don't have too much exposure in one particular area. So I also see people that will go, oh, I want to diversify. Well, I have some art and I have some real estate. And it's like, okay, but if you had, I'm just going to make up numbers. If you had $100,000 to work with, did you spend it on one piece of art? I really hope not. Did you spend it on one piece of real estate? I really hope not. If you have 25,000, 50,000. I remember having this conversation a couple of years ago with a girlfriend who came to visit me, and she's like, Lauren, I've watched you do all of this, but like, how did you do it? Like, I've been your friend, but like, what's the inside scoop? Like, how? And so I said my how, and then she says, well, is that what I should do? And I said, to be honest, I can't tell you what you should do. I don't know what you have to work with. And so she was like, well, this is what I have to work with. And I said, well, okay, well, let's make a real plan. So if you have X amount of money, don't go spend all of X on one asset class if you're going to look at diversifying, right? So the bets that I made in real estate were very low money down, best interest rate I could get to buy properties, FHA loans, whatever it might be, because that's what I could afford at that moment. That was the risk I could afford to take, but that's also what diversification looked like. I wanted to make sure that I could have 2 properties or 3 properties instead of just one. Same thing with art, same thing with stocks, same thing with any other emerging markets. If you're going to go into the stock market, how much you put towards bonds or stocks or international markets. Again, make sure that you're diversified. Within every asset class, diversify again. Within every vendor, diversify again, right? Don't have everything coming from one vendor or one source, or everything coming from the Black community, or everything coming from XYZ community. Make sure that you are diversified in source, in vendor, in asset class, all across the board. Now, with that, going into the second piece of the question, where we just need to be excellent, I believe it is proven by our diversification, right? When we have really bad markets, I was up and I felt terrible. I was very up in COVID. I was way up in COVID. I was way up in the pandemic, despite the uncertainty that existed around all of us. But it's also because I had some areas of my portfolio that were really doing gangbusters and overperforming, and I had other areas that were kind of at par. And I had actually not really many areas that were losing money, to be quite honest with you. But now we're in a different market, and I do have some areas that are down, but thankfully I've been in so long that I'm still not down in my position, even if the market is down. So I've had a bunch of people call me, Lauren, how you doing? The market's down. I'm like, market's down, but I'm still up because I'm diversified. And so I think that is the goal when we look at being excellent in everything that we do. It is making sure that the playbook that we say we play and that we run for our business, for our clients, is also represented by the life that we live and the diversification that we're able to achieve for ourselves. Like, my own success is proof of my great diversification. It is the greatest proof I could have. Like, I am my own best case study, to be quite honest with you. People come to work with Lauren because they want to work with Lauren because they see the problems I've solved for myself and other people. I'm like, well, if you could solve those problems, you could solve my problems. Like, look at your life as your own greatest case study if you're talking about being excellent and how to diversify.
Yes. Nicholas, I want to circle back to this idea that, yes, you acquired a company where most of its operations were not in Black urban communities. But you also understand diversity works in both directions. I mean, all 3 of you do. Yes, it's great to have urban and Black and minority markets, but you just have to be just as knowledgeable about the markets that you inherited and the other markets you want to go into. And this goes back to the idea of scale. You're not talking scale if you only want to sell to people that look and think like you do. Especially if you're talking about, I think either Lauren or Randal talked about global business, that not only you could be selling to other Black people who don't think and look like you do, because if you're going to move into markets overseas, and that's not beyond the reach of a Fuddruckers or any of your businesses, I really want to emphasize this idea that we're not serious about growing and scaling Black-owned companies or Black-invested companies if we're not willing to reach and see diversity from the other end of the lens. Not only, they need to understand me as a Black person in the Black consumer market, but I also need to understand these other market opportunities, because as Lauren has said, a lot of those opportunities are not going to be sitting in your backyard in downtown Atlanta or in Southside Chicago. They're going to be in rural Wisconsin. And in order to scale and grow and to do business no matter what area we're in, we have to be just as willing to go to those frontiers to diversify our market presence, or we're not serious about really growing large-scale companies.
Mm-hmm. You know, the goal is to sell a gourmet hamburger to whoever can afford to buy it. It doesn't matter what a person's color is, right? The core customer is those who recognize and are interested in, you know, procuring a gourmet hamburger. And my goal is to make sure that they're within reach of everyone who is interested in buying one. And you know, it just so happens that the person that they're selling them this gourmet hamburger is black. And we've empowered franchisees of all colors to be able to own and operate their own businesses and build wealth respectively for their own individual families. But my goal is to make sure that our franchisee base is even as diverse and as inclusive as possible. And then, you know, I also recognize that when I'm able to, you know, build companies, I'm able to then in turn invest and create jobs for people who look like me, for communities of color, you know, and, you know, it's just so many value adds to being able to do this, right? And so, you know, but if you're not in the game, you know, how are you going to really be able to deal with any adverse impact that you know exists, right? And so I just believe that those of us who have, you know, of course, dealt with all of the barriers to entry, you know, discrimination, racism, you know, all of the isms that we know exist. The only thing, and I am admittedly biased toward, that I believe can narrow the racial wealth gap in America and somewhat level the playing field is business and entrepreneurship. And, you know, and so, you know, I just chose this path to combat those things that I know through my work with the National Urban League, you know, and, you know, being in and around historically black colleges and universities and seeing what I see, is to your point from, you know, BNC World, B2C World is, you know, is continuing to try to go out and succeed every day in what it is that we're doing. Focus on being the best, competing against some of the largest multi-billion-dollar multinational corporations. As Dr. Pinkett said, you know, believing that you can do it, right? And, you know, believing that, you know, you have what it takes in order to be able to compete. You have what it takes to be able to build a brand. You have what it takes to be able to be successful. And that, you know, people will recognize that, support your efforts. And if you have the best quality product, don't be ashamed of promoting that, right? And, you know, and you know, just going to compete. And that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. And I know what can come from that, the success that comes from that allows you to be able to have the necessary resources to be able to combat some of the other issues that we know exist.
Lauren, do you think it's become, or maybe it hasn't changed at all, and I'm easier or harder, at least in the current environment, to raise capital for your business? I'm hearing different sides of that story from different people. With most people telling me it's actually not any harder than it was like last year or the year before that. But what are you seeing?
I think it depends on the sector. I think if you're raising for AI, if you're raising for deep tech or engineering, it's not as difficult depending on where you've worked and how big and bold your idea is. And that one investor, it only takes that one investor, that one advisor who, you know, is the right person to back you, who's going to open all the other doors. Just sometimes even by their association, especially if it's something new and trendy like, you know, AI or large language models, as an example. There are a lot of other businesses where it is more difficult. Businesses that require a lot of advertising money, a lot of advertising spend, a lot of the D2C companies, a lot of the e-commerce businesses that were booming, especially in the pandemic. Most of them, a lot of them, were spending 35% on advertising, on ads, on, you know, whatever, wherever, influencers, Instagram, Meta ads, what have you, even LinkedIn ads, whatever. And so those advertising dependent companies where you look at your profit margin and you look at your P&L at the end of the year and you're like, wow, 30% or so went to acquiring new customers, like my customer acquisition cost is that high. I have companies in my portfolio that are opting to finally say, like, you know what, we're going to go wholesale, because actually it makes more sense for us to like have a wholesale business and take this 30% or so hit on our sales price instead, but not have to deal with all these other elements. And so again, you have to be smart and iterative. You have to keep iterating your business model. And so if you know how to weather the storm and iterate your business model, great. I think there are also a lot of companies right now that are trying to raise money today on 2020, 2021, 2022 strategy. It doesn't work anymore. We're in 2025. So, you know, I think the companies, you could give me a company that I saw in 2020 that maybe raised money, that's looking to raise money right now. But if they have utilized AI to make their experience better, to bring down their cost basis, or to make onboarding their employees better, or to enhance any area of the business, it might not be as difficult for them to raise money. But all in all, I do think it is a difficult environment to have favorable terms to the founder. This is not the founder's fundraising market. So we can debate how difficult, depending on the type of business, the industry it's in. But I will say this is not the founder's market that it was during the pandemic, when a lot of the founders could set the terms for their businesses because they could, because that was the market that we were in. And I will say also a lot of investors, Silicon Valley institutions, what have you, are looking for higher proof points on a lot of the B2C companies. You know, they're looking for a bigger email list. They're looking for more clicks, more users, more downloads, more engagement, more orders, more initial orders, all of those things. I think that the bar is higher for terms that an entrepreneur would consider to be favorable right now.
You know, I wanted to segue back to you, Randal, on Lauren's point, and talk about what I want to talk about from two angles. And I'm asking you this, Randal, because you have, I'm going to use the word pivot. You've pivoted multiple times in the course of building, you and your partners building BCT. And so I want you to speak to the importance of being willing to pivot, both in what your company does and what kind of business you chase, given the realities of the marketplace, which Lauren refers to. Often people say, well, my marketplace is here. And I'm like, but your market moved over there 2 years, you know, over the past 2 years. Why won't you leave? And no, I'm committed to this customer. I'm committed to this market. So her point about paying attention to what you can't use 2021, 22, 2020 strategies to pursue business in 2024, 2025 if the market is not there anymore. So I want to ask you this question from that point. But the other side is this idea, and I'll be the one to be the bad guy to say it. And I said it to one of my mentees. Do we really need another ethnic hair care products company? I mean, do we need another one? Or are there other sectors? It's not 2000 anymore. There are, and by the way, if you want to build a great niche company, great. Yes, then you may need one. But if you're trying to build a large company of scale, that train may have left the station in that particular space. And I talk to so many entrepreneurs who don't want to, like, you might have to go where's the dollars going? Where's the investment dollar going? Where's the consumer dollar going? Where's the B2B dollar going? You know, whether that's a particular territory of the country or a particular sector. How important is it for entrepreneurs now more than ever to say, yes, we know what you love and believe in and what you were committed to, but in order to grow and scale, none of the billion-dollar or multi-billion-dollar companies that we see and celebrate today, I mean, whether you're talking about Meta, you can name the company. What they started as and what they are now is not the same. And we can't scale if we're so married to this is what we do, or this is who we do it for. So talk about your experience with BCT as your company evolved, and why it's important for entrepreneurs in general to be open to this idea that opportunity moves and the markets change, and it'll grow and scale. You got to be willing to pay attention to that and respond to it.
Yeah, right now, Alfred, you are ministering to all the entrepreneurs that are listening to us right now. You just gave them the seeds of a sermon, because I think every entrepreneur wrestles with the very scales that you just articulated. And just as a point of context for those listening, and Alfred, you know this, I mean, I've been in business now for 30 years, started in college. I have had the same three business partners, same three co-founders across those 30 years. We've done 5 ventures over the arc of that existence. And we've had 6 or 7 reincarnations across that time. 2 acquisitions, 4 joint ventures, 3 near-death experiences, NDEs, and the list just continues. So we've had to pivot quite a few times. We started as a training company, pivoted to a consulting company, pivoted to an IT company, pivoted back to a consulting company. And if I were to abstract your question to a set of scales, one is, like you said, do you pivot, or do you lean into become beholden to a certain identity? And I think for me, the reconciliation of that first scale is: are you still gaining traction? Because at some point, the taxi industry certainly saw something that they were losing once Uber hit the marketplace. Certainly, Blockbuster Video saw something they were losing before Netflix. I think Lauren gave reference to this. Polaroid going to digital. I mean, one of my favorite books, Good to Great, talks about confronting the brutal facts. You got to confront the brutal facts. Like, are we still making progress in what we're doing and how we're doing it? But the other scale you articulated to me is, I'm going to call it passion versus marketplace. Some people would advise entrepreneurs, follow your passion. Some would advise entrepreneurs, like, look to the market. I think the answer is both, but I think you have to check both boxes. I think you have to bring some passion to the idea, because that's what gives you the stamina and the wherewithal to overcome the inevitable challenges. But you can't just say, I'm passionate, I love what I'm doing, and I love what I want to do, and the market's going to just take it. The market's not going to take it. You got to look to the market and ask the question: what does the market need? What does the market want? Have I done my market homework, my market research? Have I validated? Lauren talked about how investors now are asking for you to show more traction in the marketplace in order to validate your business model. So I think you got to check both boxes. It's not an either or. To me, it's an and.
All right. And listen, you guys have been so generous with your time. I do want to talk about it. A couple you've already referenced it. Where does artificial intelligence, how should that be approached, viewed, obviously embraced? And let me say it: you don't have to be in the tech business. Artificial intelligence is in every industry. It's impacting every industry. This is not a tech industry question. But we still have trepidation, not just among African Americans, but certainly among African Americans, about how do you leverage this as an opportunity and not just a threat, and how do you just not ignore it, because that may be the most dangerous response at all. I mean, if each of you can kind of briefly, give advice, what your advice would be to our audience about artificial intelligence as an opportunity and or a tool for Black business. Start with you, Lauren.
AR as a tool for Black business, I think, can be really powerful for companies dealing with customer experience, brand experience, in-person experiences. I think we're seeing a lot of, augmented reality, try-on technologies, things that really get folks excited for an experience or excited to purchase something or to try something, right? We see a lot of AR and VR being used to show you what something would look like or feel like, or to immerse yourself there, to really take your imagination to new heights, which can be the product itself. It could be the marketing of the product. There's a great entrepreneur that I've done a lot of work with that has a company that creates metaverse experiences, as an example, called The Labs. I think you know her, Alfred Allen. And, that's something that alone could be the business, or that could also be your marketing engine to get more business. And so I think looking at cost-effective ways to utilize technology, to utilize AR, VR, even AI, to make sure that your company is forward-thinking, innovative, but also there is a speed right now at which business is running, and it is fast. And if you're not using technology, there is no way you are going to keep up. There are things that happen, and I actually do a lot of work with Align Technology that owns Invisalign. And I'm sure, you all saw that Pharrell went to the Met Gala with his, what looked like a gold grill, but it was an organic moment, and it was actually his Invisalign. And he had his Invisalign painted gold to look like a grill, but he was wearing his Invisalign. the Invisalign team, the Align Tech team, was on that organic, natural moment in minutes, right? So there's no sleep. Like that tweet happens, something goes up on X, something hits social, it's 10 o'clock at night, it's 7 o'clock, wherever it is in the world, your team has to be ready to respond. And it's not just on social, it's on shipping and problems and security breaches and like all sorts of things. So if you are not embracing all technology that is available to you, and if you do not have a team or a process for keeping up with technology and how it can be utilized and implemented within your business, you are behind the 8 ball. Because going back to the last question about fundraising, what any good, smart investor is going to want to know is how are you, leveraging the use of technology, not just, AR and VR and AI, but the use of technology across the board. How are you utilizing technology in an efficient and intelligent manner to make your business run better? And that doesn't necessarily mean replacing people. It can mean making a better system. It can mean making a better process. If you're in, the business of Fuddruckers and restaurants, it could mean having a better way to close out all of your point of sale systems, or having another layer of accountability that just runs through one more filter to make sure that your GMs can sleep a little bit better at night. Whatever it is. But making sure that you're utilizing technology to show that you are ready to be a forward-thinking business person who's not just thinking about today and is thinking about tomorrow.
So, since you brought your name up, Nicholas, how is the AI/technology conversation being had at your companies?
Well, I believe that it is something that should be embraced. I don't believe it's anything that should be feared. I believe that an introduction of a new technology and change, people always have a tendency to fear. But I believe that we've had past instances where the introduction of automation and things of that nature have shifted and molded and transitioned businesses and processes to becoming more streamlined. So I don't see AI as anything other than that. I believe if we can echo Emerson, he told us about building a better mousetrap. And even if you build your house in the woods, the world will make a beaten path to your door. So the reality is that by introducing and accepting and embracing new technologies and finding ways to enhance the guest experience, I believe is something that AI could help us to be able to do. Processing data, of course, to better understand our customer. I think consumer behavior is what's most important to all retailers. Understanding and being able to adapt and to shift to meet our guests where they are is important, and I believe that AI will help us to be able to do that. So I'm excited for and about the introduction of these types of things to be able to help reshape our industry, and we'll welcome them.
I almost feel guilty throwing this question to you, Randall, a company run by engineers, founded by engineers. But talk about that artificial intelligence as not only as an opportunity, but to Lauren's point, having a broader technology strategy, because it's not just about I'm using this tool, I'm using that tool. As you said earlier, a tool is not a strategy.
Yeah, I think Lauren and Nicholas gave tremendous voice to the question. And again, to be clear, BCT Partners, we're a technology consulting firm. We're an AI consulting firm. We're a firm powered by innovation. That's what we do. That's who we are. So we're helping our clients to apply these tools to their business, which every business owner has to ask the question, AI for what? Is it AI for productivity, which is what a chat GPT could do for you? Is it AI for automation, which is what robotic process automation, RPA, could do for you? Is it AI for insights, which is what machine learning and analyzing data and generating insights could do for you? Is it AI for innovation in your business? Meaning, are you introducing a product or a service that's powered by AI? And in fact, we were such a big believer in AI that 8 years ago, we began investing our own capital in developing our own suite of AI solutions. And we now have a solution we call Precision Analytics, which analyzes data using machine learning to generate insights. But my point is, you have to ask that foundational question, AI for what? But I will say this, you better ask the question. In my opinion, again, we talk about the obsoleting of businesses. If you're not asking that question right here, right now, you are on the path to being obsolete, because somebody else will, you won't, and they will win.
And it happens faster than it ever happened before. I mean, the rise and fall of whole industries happens faster than it ever happened before. Listen, guys, you've been very generous with your time. I'd like you to close out with, I always like to close out my conversations with, if there was one thing that you want this audience of aspiring founders, entrepreneurs, investors in entrepreneurship to walk away from this conversation, what recommendation, action item would you want them to think about, or better yet, take action on as a result of this conversation? And let me start with Nicholas and work my way. We'll let Lauren go. Usually it's ladies first, but we'll let Lauren close it out. So Nicholas, Randal, and then Lauren.
Well, I would encourage all to dream beyond the resources that you currently control. I believe that it is very important in the entrepreneurial process to have the courage enough to dare to dream and to believe that you are capable and competent enough to be able to start, to acquire, to grow and manage a business. And have that desire to be rooted in something beyond just personal, individual wealth, to bring about a positive impact on the communities for which we serve, lifting as we climb. So I would encourage people to do that.
Randal?
Yeah, I'll close on one of my favorite quotes, and I don't know who said it, but I know what they said. It's we are not meant to see through each other, but to see each other through. And I believe in these days and times where some of us may feel like we're not seen, we're not supported, we're not valued, know that history has proven that we have everything that we need. But what's most important is that we have each other. And the mentorship we talked about, the role modelship that we've talked about, the investing and the supporting one another, and the fact that, I love the point you made earlier, Alfred, about how we have matured as a people, as a community, where we have more resources, more expertise, more wherewithal. And Earl Graves, in his book, How to Succeed in Business Without Being White, said that the number one challenge of our community is leveraging our might. That's what he said. And so for a Black Enterprise Town Hall, what I want folks to walk away with is a resolve to leverage our might.
Wow. I love that, leveraging our might. I mean, I also love that because my company is LMB Group, and it stands for Leverage, Momentum, and Build. And we're 15 years old, and that's all the things I believe in doing. So I really appreciate that, Randal. Thank you. I'll say two things, maybe three things, all quotables. So one is from my dad. And he often says to me, something he's been saying to me for many years now, let your reach exceed your grasp, right? So just keep reaching, keep going. Let your reach exceed your grasp. Be hungry, work hard, keep reaching, keep going, keep reaching. So that's one. Two, going back to the beginning of our conversation today, something I like to say often, I'm actually having it made into an LED sign for my office, but profit solves all problems.
Yes.
There are a lot of times that I see operators and folks, I'm sorry, we all like that, huh? See I got the guys to smile all the way at the end of our 90 minutes. It takes 90 minutes for you guys to smile. I say profit in the business model, right? So, but profit solves all problems, right? So every day I try to be profitable. It won't happen every day. Maybe you're a little bit down, but the goal is to be profitable, and focus your efforts on that in your business. I think a lot of entrepreneurs can get caught up in feelings and emotions and ego and all the other things. Profit will solve all of those things. It'll find you the right people. It'll attract you the best talent. It'll get you the better office, the better life, all the things you want. Profit will solve all of them. Trust me. And then, last one, and this has been something that's been heavy on my mind the last couple of weeks because my son, Jaden, is 17 and a senior. And so he's going off to college. And he's 17 now. He's a senior now, yeah. Graduates in a couple of weeks. So a couple of days, actually. So, but he's decided, and this was something that came on the conversation earlier, by the gentleman, to be an entrepreneur. And as we were going through the college process, I had a conversation with several of my friends and colleagues because I wanted perspective and POV on what folks thought about some of the options that he had and the decisions that we were looking at making. And someone said to me two things in particular. One is, you don't get everything you deserve, but you deserve everything you get. I think that is just a great mantra for life and entrepreneurship. You know, you're not going to always get everything you want, but, you know, keep shooting your shot because you're going to get something. And what you get in the end, you absolutely do deserve. And also this point that I believe it was Nicholas that brought up, but I know Nicholas and Randal have discussed it today, is this idea of entrepreneurship in general and how important that is for our community, for the Black community, to be owners. And even if we don't own ourselves, to know how to operate like an owner, to know how to take risks like an owner would take risks. No risk, no reward is a very, very true sentiment. And we see that within our communities. We see the difference in someone who works an hourly job versus a salary job versus someone who takes a bigger risk and has equity, and that equity, you know, becomes a great reward in the future for them having taken that risk. And so keep taking your risks. You know, but I think I would love to see more folks in our community learn to be entrepreneurs. I think a lot of folks are going to school these days to learn things that might not be so applicable in the very near future. And so we spent a lot of time, and again, just like a passion area of mine as we talk about wealth and raising our children, was also like predicting into the future. Class of 2029. What's 2029 going to be like? My daughter's right behind him. She's college class of 2031. Like, what are the skills that are important? Like the top liberal arts school? I mean, top liberal arts is great, but what's top liberal arts going to do for my kid in 2029? He's going to go to Babs and learn how to build businesses, learn how to be an investor, and learn how to call shots and make shots and take risks and take calculated risks. And so however you can learn to do that, that can be the School of Hard Knocks, that can be at college, that can be in an entrepreneurship class at your existing college, that can be an internship, whatever it is, but find a way to learn how to take risk. If you don't ever learn how to take any kind of risk, calculated smart risk, I hope. But if you never learn how to take risks, you'll never learn how to build wealth.
That's such an important note to end on. You know, to your point, Lauren, we got to be willing to get out there and take risks. And my message is, and if you're not going to take the risk, support and invest in somebody who's willing to take the risk. Go on the ride with them, even if you're not the one that's going to captain that ship. Listen, Lauren, Randal, Nicholas, thank you so much for joining us for this virtual town hall, the Black Enterprise Virtual Town Hall, the future of Black business and entrepreneurship. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us for our latest Black Enterprise Virtual Town Hall, the future of Black business and entrepreneurship. We hope you're leaving this discussion with greater clarity and confidence in your pursuit of better economic outcomes for you and your family, the broader Black community, and ultimately our entire nation. Remember to subscribe to Black Enterprise on YouTube to watch the playback of today's town hall, as well as all of our video interviews and virtual events on demand. For the latest information on upcoming Black Enterprise in-person events, including the Black Men Excel Summit, the Be Smart HBCU Hackathon, and the Woman of Power Summit, go to blackenterprise.com/BE events. Again, thank you for joining us. All the best to you and yours from all of us at Black Enterprise as we celebrate 55 years of elevating your excellence. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any affiliated organization, company, or institution.